they changed the course of events in the Kharkiv direction. The mysterious Special Forces unit Arton X specifically targeted the Russians. Ukrainian scouts drove the occupiers out of the village even though they were outnumbered. The Russian army doesn't know where to look. From shame, the generals are furious. What, in the end, was the operation that finally drove the enemy out? About all this later.
Step by step, one after the other, through the trees they quietly move forward. Here, the key is concentration, speed, and the element of surprise. Nothing should give away their presence. This is one of the types of mandatory training for the fighters of the Arton X Special Forces unit. According to the legend, the guys are advancing in the victory zone.
Mickey, we're moving out. Follow us.
I'm hiding. Oops, I fell.
Hold the intersection. You film after the column reaches you. You'll be the last one in line.
The instructor says that such training helps to establish a bond between fighters and develops attention.
There's such a war going on right now that we can't just walk around because there are so many drones. First and foremost, it's about observing one another because we can't afford to lose anyone. When they walk and turn their heads, they need to understand that the guy who is following them, we can't lose him.
The guys just returned from combat missions? A few days of rest and back to training.
We review and analyze our mistakes from previous missions so that on the next task, we lose fewer of our comrades and perform our mission more effectively.
The Special Forces unit Arton X was created recently. It's less than a year old, yet the guys have already proven themselves on the battlefield. Until recently, Arton X was classified.
Arton expanded and we got the Special Forces unit Arton X. The first task was in the Kharkiv direction where we took about 40 hectares of forest. The second task was in Rivnopil. The third task is in the Zaporizhzhia direction, and we've been there for quite a long time.
To get into this special unit, you have to go through a tough selection process. The commander, known by the nickname Favorite, personally selected the first volunteers.
First, it's physical condition. Second, it's psychological state. And third, and most importantly, it's the desire. As of today, we already have 2 companies, and we're forming a 3rd company. The priority is up to 40 years old. We're trying to recruit.
It was the fighters of Arton X who liberated Kamyansky from the occupiers last year in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Then a fighter with the call sign Alik led his group forward.
We moved in groups, clearing everything out. There were times of constant battles. Mortars are safest in shootouts. There are mortars. That's something you don't hear in the drone. Some Russians had to retreat, while others had already surrendered to the troops. They drove the Russians out of the village even though they were outnumbered. They were in a frenzy, in a panic. Can you imagine? Out of nowhere, a group of people appears and they just start throwing grenades at the buildings, shooting in bursts. They come in shooting from machine guns, just kicking down the doors and starting to shoot. What can be done? They didn't expect anything from there. Nothing.
The uniqueness of this special unit is that all the fighters are released under the UDO. Shiloh had previously served his mandatory military service, and when he learned about the opportunity to join the army, he didn't hesitate.
When we were being selected, we talked. I was asked why I wanted to join the YAO ranks, the Armed Forces of Ukraine. I replied that, to me, no matter who they went to, this is our land, our state. I want to be among my brothers in arms who are a support for me.
And the Swede has ATO behind him. He says he initially looked for options on a large scale to get into service.
I probably filed about 50 applications. I wrote to the courts and the prosecutor's office, but I never received any responses. And only when I ended up in the colony was I able to take advantage of the new law and get here. I had 9 months left until my freedom.
Could you have waited it out? I could have, but I didn't want to. There are many guys without previous combat experience, and among them is a fighter with the call sign Mokri. He was one of the first to get to Arton X.
At that time, it was my dream to join such a unit. So, I took advantage of that opportunity. I am proud to serve here, defending our homeland.
Wet and his comrades recently returned from the front, and their daring special operation, where 8 soldiers held the defense of their positions, has already gone down in the history of our war.
The task was to prevent the enemy from advancing. Next, we took up combat positions. Right at the outskirts of the village, we built a defensive line. In the facade, they occupied 3 sectors from which danger came.
And so, after 5 long days, the Butinka Russians learned that the mountain fighters had entered the position and had thrown all their forces there. But the guys held their ground.
The assaults came first from one flank, then from the other, and then even from all 3. I can tell you, it adds confidence. The look on your brothers that you meet, looking at him during the fight, seeing confidence in him, seeing this rush, the adrenaline, this gives you the strength to continue the fight and not to worry about the flank.
On the last day I got injured during the retreat. He will take pride in this special operation because the guys carried out the order. And we didn't lose a single fighter.
Drones were constantly above us. When they spotted us, our group came under heavy mortar fire. We had to move quickly. I found my second wind and ran on both. I'm the only one who got a minor injury.
These guys are carrying out tasks from the main intelligence directorate. They are already feared. The occupiers, because after months of active fighting, the soldiers of Artana have proven their effectiveness. And the plans for life after the war are the same as for all other Ukrainian fighters. Simple and understandable.
We young guys, we also want a quiet family life, some family fishing, conversations around the fire, camping trips in peaceful forests where no one will run out at you. Yes, of course, we want that. These are our dreams, but for now they are far away. Our top priority dreams are for our Ukraine to be at peace and independent.
Lyudmila Havrilyuk, Alexander Petrovsky, We Are Ukraine, Marathon, the only news.
The Russians are fleeing not only from Ukrainian lands, but also from their own territories. The armed forces of Ukraine are terrorizing the Russian army in Kursk. The occupiers are crying crocodile tears right in the trenches while Putin is trying to hide the number of casualties. This has never happened before. How did the Ukrainian defenders make the Russians beg for mercy? About this in our material.
They broke through the defense and advanced deep into Russia. The armed forces of Ukraine have launched a new counteroffensive in the Kursk region, and they have already shown a high result, advancing to the southeast of Sudzha.
According to various estimates, Ukrainian units have managed to advance 5 to 7 kilometers deep into Russian territory.
Under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine are the towns of Cherkasy, Konopelka, Ulanka, Kulmakova, and Fanasievka. The enemy used these settlements as key defense points.
The Ukrainian counteroffensive, in addition to the surprise factor for the Russian side, has the goal of expanding the zone with the presence of the SOU in the Kursk facility.
And this could become that very trump card in future negotiations for both Putin and Western partners.
Kursk is a very strong card in all negotiations, especially with countries, that are very important to us, especially with the countries of the global south.
For the countries of the global south, the successful operation of the Ukrainian defense forces is a vivid testament that the Russian army is unable to carry out its operations in the south under control of territories, in Donetsk or accordingly. And on
Putin's propagandists in Russia are going into hysterics. The new offensive could threaten the rear areas south of Sudzha and complicate the Russians' ability to cut off Ukrainian ground communication lines.
Today's went. The main counteroffensive is for the workers.
Next, the leader of the TikTok troops, Abdiel Audinov, began to tell how, somehow miraculously, his troops had once again avoided the SSU. The servant of Putin complains that the Russian Ministry of Defense does not recognize his merits to the homeland.
The only ones who don't acknowledge us at all are our department. I don't understand why this is happening. They believe that if they don't notice this Ahmar, it will cease to exist after that. And at the end of the Vita, you probably already have some kind of conscience. How long can this continue?
This is not the first offensive by the Ukrainian defense forces in the Kursk direction. And perhaps such tactics during periodic breakthroughs are effective. In 6 months of operations, the total losses of the enemy amounted to about 40,000 people. Of them, over 16,000 Putin soldiers have been killed.